Good morning. I hope this video finds you doing well on this Thursday of Passion Week. Today we have a great discussion in that we're looking at what the Bible has to say about the end times. That's something that has been a debate among Christians, and good people have held all kinds of different views about eschatology. And so today, as we dive into the text, it's my prayer that God will help us, that He will use this as a means of grace, and that the end result will be diligent to study God's Word, and at the same time generous with those who perhaps come down at a different place. So with that in mind, let's jump in. And so this morning we're looking at what I'm calling the eschatological consummation. When you look at the end of the Bible and you think about what's going on at the end, all through this class we've pointed out that the Bible starts with the cosmic wedding of Adam and Eve, the dirt man, and his bride, and they fail. They're left to the freedom of their will. They choose to rebel against God. They're kicked out of Eden. And so the whole story of the Bible is God creating this second couple by Himself, in the person of Jesus, becoming the new Adam, and then living the perfect life, dying for the sins to make possible salvation for everyone, but in dying for His people, actually taking away their sins, and then transforming the church into the new bride who will love God enough to do what God wants. And as such, this new couple will live in Eden forever, restored Eden. And so when you look at the eschatological consummation in this class, that's kind of how we've looked at it. But the Bible has more to say about the end times than just kind of that new Adam proposition. So where Christians agree, so if you're talking about Orthodox Christianity, Orthodox in the sense of what the Christian churches believe since the very beginning, all Christians agree that Jesus will come back, and that return will be a bodily return. And here's a very clear statement, Acts 1:10 and 11. And while they were gazing into heaven as they went, behold, two men stood by them in white robes and said, Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking into heaven? This Jesus who was taken up from you into heaven will come in the same way as you saw Him go to heaven. So there was a bodily ascension, this body that Jesus had died in, this body that was buried, this body physical that was raised. The angel assures the first Christians that in that same body Jesus will return. And so anyone who teaches that Jesus will not return bodily, or that Jesus' existence isn't the same as it was, has a real problem with this verse. This verse is clear. There's not much debate about what it can mean. And so all Christians are going to say, yes, I believe that Jesus will return physically, and certain things are going to happen. All Christians believe that. But there are major interpretive schools within that. So if you ask people, well, tell me more about it, it gets into the weeds pretty quick at that point. And historically, I think there are four schools. You could add fifth one here, but the main ones that you run into will be historic premillennialism. And that view goes all the way back to Irenaeus, the end of the 100s AD. And he believed that the Bible teaches that second coming of Jesus will usher in a 1,000-year reign on earth. And it's clear that he's getting his view from Revelation that speaks about Christ reigning. And so coming to the puzzle pieces, he says, okay, what's going to happen is the bodily return will happen, and then that will give way to this 1,000 years of peaceful reign. It's looked at in the prophets where the lion will lay down with the lamb and things like that. Dispensational premillennialism is a subgroup of historic premillennialism in that dispensationalism distinguish between the rapture and the second coming. And so Jesus will come back and rapture Christians, and then after a short time, he will return to earth, and then you'll have the 1,000-year reign. And so historic premillennialism and dispensational premillennialism, a lot in common. The dispensationalist will emphasize this distinction between the rapture and the second coming. Amillennialism teaches that there's a bodily return, but there's no literal 1,000-year reign. That's amillennialism is going to teach that's figurative language. And then postmillennialism teaches that there'll be the second coming, but that will occur after kind of a golden age on earth, after 1,000 years where people are living such Christian lives that it begins to even affect nature. And so if we look at the views, this is kind of a oversimplification, but you might think of the church's purity, very pure at the beginning, but over time it will go down. At the end of 7 years, Christians will be raptured. Christ will have his earthly kingdom, and then the final rebellion, and then eternity. And the power of evil over time is increasing until finally the church is taken away. Adherence to the view, Irenaeus, Papias, Justin Martyr, a lot of modern people. So R.A. Torrey helped with the fundamentals. George Eldon Ladd, very scholarly person. So very common view. Many people held it in the past. Many people hold it today. Dispensational premillennialism is a very popular view today. And at one time, in fact, Bryan College almost exclusively held, in terms of its Bible faculty, held to dispensational premillennialism. This is a view taught at Dallas Seminary. If you've been in the library, you've seen that we have the collection of Harry Ironside. He was a noted dispensational premillennialist. Darby was a very big proponent, and C.I. Scofield, who did the Scofield Study Bible. Biola, Moody, Dallas, Grace, all hold to this view. And with it, it's the same as historic, except there's a difference between when Christians are raptured and the second coming. And some people might do a mid-trib rapture, but basically you have the church's purity going down. over time, and then the power of evil going up. When it gets so bad, Christians are raptured. You have 7 years, and then you have Christ's earthly reign in the millennia and the final rebellion in heaven. Very popular view. Many good people have held this view, which is true of all the views. Good people have held all the views. Amillennialism sees the purity of the church and the power of evil both increasing over time, that this is of unknown duration, and that at the end you have Christ return. A lot of Reformed people will hold this view. Kuyper held it, Louis Berkhoff, Bruce Waltke, at least at one time, held this view. And so amillennialists would teach that the Bible does not teach Christians to expect a literal 1,000-year earthly reign. There's an admission that, yes, Revelation teaches 1,000 years, but the intent of what that passage is about is not to lead us to, some kind of reinstitution of temple worship or anything like that, but rather it's just saying that Christ is going to reign for a long time. And then the minority view, very much a minority view, is postmillennialism. And that teaches that the purity of the church was lowest when Christ died, and over time it will increase, and that the power of evil over the time will be conquered by Christ. Postmillennialists generally see the Great Tribulation as talking about the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. And then you have Christ ruling until some unknown time where kind of this golden age of Christianity happens. And at the end of that age, when the church is just so walking with Jesus, then he will bodily return. And some pretty good people have held that view. Athanasius held it. He's called the patron saint of postmillennialists. Augustine, Eusebius, Calvin, Jonathan Edwards held that view. In fact, a lot of the Puritans were called Fifth Monarchy men because they were seeing kind of the fifth kingdom to come as Jesus and his rule in the church. And so those are wildly different views, and people hold the views, and they hold them staunchly, so that you do get major disagreement on like the details of how all this works out. So when we come today and somebody says, well, to you as a Christian, how am I supposed to understand the end of the Bible? The issues, so this isn't a Christian issue versus a non-Christian issue. This is an inter-Christian debate. The issue surrounds the date of the book of Revelation. So if you take an early date, you're going to end up in one camp, and if you take a later date, probably you're going to end up in another camp. And the same is true with eschatological discourses in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. It's interesting that while I'm making this recording on Wednesday of Passion Week, that's actually, I think Wednesday was Passion Week was the day that the eschatological discourses happened. So it's kind of a interesting thing that we're going to look at it now. So the issue, when was Revelation written? Is it early or late? What is the eschatological discourse about? Is it about the end of the world, or is it about the end of the temple? And then how do you do this 490-year prophecy in Daniel? Because the 7 years of the tribulation, where that comes from is how you interpret the last 7 in the 490 years. And that's involved with a little bit of some technical issues. So let's dive in, and this is what we have. So two views on the date of Revelation. One is that it's a pre-70 date, that it was written before the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. And the other view is that it was written in 96, majority view. And that's, of course, 26 years after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. So the majority view is the 96 view. When I went to seminary, I went to a very good seminary. The only view I ever heard was the 96 in terms of the date for Revelation. And that goes back to Irenaeus. He lived at the end of the hundreds AD. He was writing a book against heresies in 180, I think. And he argued that, hey, John wrote in Domitian's day. And so that's pretty early, 180. You're talking about within, 80 years or 100 years of 130 years when it was written. So that's very early evidence. In terms of the minority, a lot of the people who take the postmillennial position will go with an early date. In fact, I haven't read just hundreds of things on it, but it seems to me that if you go with the eschatology of hope, the way that happens is because you think that Revelation was primarily about the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. These people take that view, and so they have a very hopeful eschatology where the church will triumph in this age. And a third thing that we need to so we have the majority view and we have a minority, but significant minority. The third thing we need to talk about is what's called a Christian flight to Pella. And this is a reference to a passage in Eusebius where he describes the siege, and then he says, based on a prophecy that they had read, all the Christians left Jerusalem and relocated to Pella. And many people would point out that that's doing what Jesus said: when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, flee to the mountains. And so they crossed the Jordan River. Jesus had said, pray that it not be in winter, when, that's when the Jordan's in flood stage. And so they went to Pella, and they didn't perish in the 70 AD destruction of Jerusalem. So that's going to be an issue. Is that the right interpretation of that, or is it not right? So what is the evidence that Revelation was written in 96 AD? And if you just go to study Bibles, these are going to be the arguments that you'll find. It's the vast majority of scholars. You go to maybe Greg Beale's commentary on Revelation. He's a very good scholar. He's going to say that this is what the historic evidence points to. And it's chiefly Irenaeus's evidence of John's teaching. I mean, he's living very close to when the book was written, within 100 years, 120 years, something like that. And he's saying it's what John did. There's a technical argument that the kind of emperor worship that is happening did not happen like that until Domitian. And there's an argument about persecutions. I think those could go either way. I mean, there were persecutions in Nero's day, and there were Jewish persecutions before that. That the great whore of Babylon is Rome, is kind of the persecuting power, and that the condition of the Asiatic churches, what Revelation describes doesn't match what we know of the churches if there's a Neronian date. So all of those are the primary evidence for the Domitianic date. But you might notice that all those are external. They aren't in the book per se. They're more observations outside the book. Those who argue for a Neronian date will point out that the book starts with this phrase, these are the things that must soon take place. And if Christians are being persecuted in 67 and Revelation is talking about destruction of Jewish persecutors in Asia Minor, then that text makes perfect sense. These are the things that must soon take place, because the book ends just a few sentences from the end. It repeats, these are the things that must shortly take place. And I think I might have mistyped here. It may not be the exact phrase, but it is very close if it's not exact. So you have beginning and the end with this statement that this book is about what will happen shortly. Well, if it was written in Nero's time and it happened in 70, that makes perfect sense. If it was written in Domitian's time and the vast majority of the book, say from the beginning of 4, all the way to the end, that none of that has happened, that seems strange. If that's really what these words mean. There's a technical, sorry, I reorganized these, but I didn't change the animation. There's a connection between the number 666 and Nero. 11:1 looks like the temple is still standing, but this statement about the great whore of Babylon, 11:8 makes the great city Jerusalem. And that's without a doubt because it says the great city is where their Lord was crucified. And Jesus wasn't crucified in Rome. He was crucified in Jerusalem. There's an argument about how you count the 6 emperors, and then there's an argument about the 490 years. But 11:8, 8 and 9 makes it clear that at least the first description of the city, the great city, it has to be Jerusalem, and here's why. Their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city, He Polis, He Megale, that symbolically is called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified. So the great city is Sodom, where their Lord, the great city is Egypt, where their Lord. Well, what about, is the great city Babylon? When you look at this, the great city, so this is Tes Polos, Tes Megales in the genitive of the great city, that's 11:8. But I took it from the genitive and put it, where you can see it in the nominative. And you can see that that's the exact phrase that's being used in all these, the great city, this great city, the mega whore. And of course, that idea of the mega whore is all through the Old Testament. Jerusalem is called a whore in Isaiah, same exact word, the whore city. How faithful Zion has become a whore city. So the question is, if it's the Domitianic date, then the great whore is Rome, but Um, so somebody might point out, when was Rome ever married to God? In the Old Testament, there was only one city married to God, and that was Jerusalem, where the temple was. So this is the passage I alluded to, revelation of Jesus Christ, which he gave to show his servants the things that must soon take place. So those who argue for the Domitianic date, they going to have to do some major interpretation with this word soon, because the vast majority of the material from 4 all the way to the end hasn't happened yet under those who take that view. When you look at the end, so this is verses, just sentences from the end of the book. He said to me, "These words are trustworthy and true. The Lord, the God of spirits of the prophets, sent his angel to show his servants what must soon take place." So you've got the book bookended by this is the thing that will soon happen. And those who take the Neronian date would say, well, it did happen soon. In fact, most people would say most everything has happened up until maybe 19 or 1,000-year reign, whichever one you go with. So Irenaeus, this is where he writes, and it's the major evidence that many people follow. So that was seen not so very long ago, but almost in our own day, toward the end of Domitian's reign. And so Irenaeus, who's one of the major early church fathers, helped rescue the Christian church from Gnosticism with this book Against Heresies. He's pretty clear, this is when you date the book, and he lived very close to when the documents were written. On the other hand, who can commit adultery against God? And you might look at English translations, and I think the ESV translates it commit adultery, and there's a debate, is it fornication or adultery? But this word, whore, porne, where we get the word pornography from, it's used of Jerusalem in all these places. And Jerusalem was married to God, and Jerusalem was unfaithful to that commitment, and Jerusalem was the place where the blood of the saints was spilled, which is all emphasized here. Now, if that's true, what's going on in Revelation would be this. Christians are being persecuted by Jews in Asia Minor, the 7 churches, and they were being killed and hounded, and Jesus is saying, look, hang on, because the day will come when God will put an end to the persecution. If that's how you approach the book, then the message of Revelation is the same to every persecuted culture. If you're in a country and the government is persecuting the Christian church, well, just hang on, because the day will come when God's had enough. And when God's had enough, he'll wipe the little 2-bit rulers out of the way, and Christianity will continue to flourish. So 2 different ways, all tied in with the date. In terms of the earlier date, many people have pointed out that the Bible uses something called gematria. And you might say to me, what in the world is gematria? Well, gematria is when you don't have an elegant number system like we do. We got ours in the Middle Ages from Islam. The Arabic numeral system works really well. Before that, people used their alphabet as their number system, and so the letters just become numbers. And so this is the one in Hebrew, and I've got a concordance that I used for many years before computers came on the scene so much. And actually the verse numbers were written in Hebrew, and so I can't tell you how many times I've used that concordance and started counting on my hand: Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, okay, 5, and you just write your numbers with the alphabet. And cultures that do that practice gematria, and Greeks practice gematria. They have a couple of obsolete letters, a stigma here, and a kappa, and a samsi. I needed to put that mark on there, but that's their system. Well, if you practice gematria, and there's evidence in Scripture that the authors understood gematria, you can look it up in a Bible dictionary and see the evidence. What's weird about that is if you practice gematria, then any word in your language also will carry an inherent number. And long story short, there's a connection with the number 666 and the phrase Nero Caesar. And any good commentary will kind of walk you through it, but if the Domitianic date is right, Nero had been dead 26 years. So, why are they, it'd be like today talking about what President Truman, is going to do in this crisis? I mean, that has been so long ago. So, the issue of Nero Caesar, many scholars would say, would favor the earlier date, not the later. And this is kind of how you end up with the numbers. And about half the manuscripts end up with the number 616. And most people point out that that's two different ways to spell Neron Caesar versus Nero Caesar. And so even text critics are saying, yeah, that's what the scribes are doing there. In terms of the early date, this would be how the emperors are counted in 1709. You can see that in any study Bible. So when we come to Revelation, the interpretation of Revelation becomes a primary issue of when it was written. And that's a fairly complex argument, and I encourage you, be a Berean, dive in, search, look at the arguments. And, some people, when they come to this, will say, the text talks about the stars falling from the sky, and I can go out in the night sky and the stars are still up there. How could this have anything to do with, 70 AD? The problem with that is the passage, stars from the sky, is actually a quote from Isaiah 13. And if you go read Isaiah 13, the stars falling from the sky is describing Babylon being destroyed. And so it may be a case where we're assuming one thing about the language and the author is intending something else. And so be a Berean, go check for yourself, see where you come down. Now, when we come to the eschatological discourse, and that's the thing I had you read through with Mark 13 in the parallel text, just like Revelation, there are two views. There's a partial preterist view that says that this is talking about stuff leading up to the destruction in 70 AD. And then another group will say, no, nearly everything in there is looking to some kind of future or dual fulfillment, imperfect earthly fulfillment in 70, and then completely literal future fulfillment at the end of the age. So the same issue, we see the same issue that was in Revelation is the exact same issue in the eschatological discourse. Is Jesus talking about the destruction of the cosmos, or is Jesus talking about the destruction of the temple? When you read through the stories, the narratives, which one seems right to you? And could it be that Jesus is talking about both those at the same time, the destruction in 70 AD and then the ultimate destruction of the world? So this is a quotation of Eusebius of Caesarea, Ecclesiastical History 3:5. This is where that Christian flight to Pella comes from. So those who come down on the partial preterist side are going to point to this, and this is what it says. On the other hand, the people of the church in Jerusalem were commanded by an oracle given by revelation before the war to those in the city who were worthy of it to depart and to dwell in the cities of Perea, which they called Pella. To it, those who believed in Christ migrated from Jerusalem, that when the holy men had altogether deserted the royal capital of the Jews and the whole land of Judea, the judgment of God might at last overtake them for all their crimes against Christ and his apostles, and all the generation of the wicked utterly blotted out from among men. And so, people point out that very well may be speaking of this prophecy in Mark 13, but when you see the abomination of desolation standing where he ought not to be, let the reader understand, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. So when you read through those texts, I invite you just to make the case for 70 AD and make the case for non-70 AD and see where you come down. Be a Berean. If the Bible is clear, if God is an effective communicator, then that should mean that we should be able to get what he says. Then the last thing I want to talk about is two views on Daniel's 490 years, because the interpretation of Revelation, the interpretation of the eschatological discourse, all touches on exactly what Daniel was talking about in this 490 years. And this is a place where the debate gets a little technical. Because Daniel, this portion of Daniel, portions of Daniel are written in different languages. And I remember when I worked through this part of Daniel the first time, and I came to a verse, and it talked about wrath being poured on it, or wrath being poured on him. And I knew from Hebrew that the difference, there is no neuter in Hebrew, and so there's this pronominal suffix, and the debate between these two readings is between the antecedent of one pronominal suffix. I'm just going to pull up the text and bring BibleWorks down so you can see what I'm talking about. So this is Daniel 9. What is it, like 21? 70 weeks are decreed to atone for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal vision and prophet, and to anoint a most holy place. or the other way, to anoint a holy of holies. You could translate that a most holy one, and notice in Hebrew, to Messiah, a holy of holies. Know therefore that from the going out of the word to restore and rebuild to the coming of Mashiach Nagid, Messiah Prince, know that there'll be 62 sevens, 7 sevens and 62 sevens. Then it says, after the 62 sevens, an anointed one, and if we read it in Hebrew, after the 62, Messiah will be cut off, and there will be nothing to him. And then it says, and the people of the prince who is to come. And the Hebrew there says, and the people of Nagid. And notice that's the same word that's been used of the Messiah, the coming one, and its end. Look at this. And to the end there shall be war, desolations are decreed. Well, this is a pronominal suffix, and this word can be him or it can be it. And so the question is, does it refer to this prince or does it refer to something else? Well, look at how English versions do this text. Its end, and so destroy the city and its sanctuary. Its end will come with a flood. NLT, the end will come, so that kind of avoids it. The end therefore will be with the flood, but his end. Now I want you to look at that just for a second. So what we're talking about in Hebrew is we're talking about the antecedent of the word him that's on pronominal suffix on the word end. And does it refer to the prince? Well, if it's the prince, then this is like the Antichrist, the coming Antichrist. If it's the city, then this is saying the people of Messiah Prince will destroy the city by their prayers. If you've read Hebrew at all, and if you read the whole thing, read it over and over, stuff like this will happen all the time. There is nothing, in making it refer to the city or here. That's a very minor interpretation, and yet whole schools of eschatology are built depending on that one thing, on him or on it. And so when we come to Daniel's 490 years, there are going to be radical interpretations. And so just in the time we have left, I'll walk you through how it works. And if we had time, I had you read through Daniel's confession. This is the way to talk to God and to confess your sin and to plead for his mercy. And then this is God's answer. Then the man Gabriel, and Gabriel means the strength of God. And it's interesting, the only two places Gabriel appears in the Bible is around these stories in Daniel, and when Gabriel appears to Mary to announce the coming of the Messiah. And so it seems that we're not too far out of the loop to say that the Bible's connecting these two events. Then the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision previously, came to me in my extreme weariness about the time of the evening offering, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the future anniversary of Jesus dying on the cross. And he gave instruction and talked with me and said, "Oh, Daniel, I've come to give you insight and understanding. At the beginning of your supplications, the command was issued, and I have come to tell you, for you are highly esteemed. So give heed to the message and gain understanding of the vision. 70 weeks have been decreed for your people and your holy city, to finish transgression, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint Kadosh Kadoshim, Holy of Holies." And, the tabernacle is called the Holy of Holies. Aaron is called Holy of Holies. So is it a holy place or is it a holy person? And you can see in this translation they put place in italics, but the phrase in Hebrew you saw is just Holy of Holies. So you are to know and discern that from the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah, the Prince, or Prince Messiah, Mashiach Nagid, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again with a plaza and a moat, even in times of distress. Then, after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. And the people of Nagid, who is coming, will destroy the city and sanctuary, and its end will come in a flood. Even to the end there will be war. So if you go with its end, then this prophecy is talking about the city and the sanctuary. If you go with his end, then this is talking about Nagid, who is a different Nagid from Mashiach Nagid, spelled exactly the same way. He will make a firm covenant with many. So if it's the its end, then this is the Messiah will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week. So this is, you're looking for 77s. We've had 69 go by. The final one halfway through, it says in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. And on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until complete destruction. When it is decreed is poured out, one that makes desolate. Well, how does that work out? So this would be the standard dispensational way that it works out. That you have a decree, and many people will put the start date of the decree as 445, and you have 7 weeks up till the rebuilding of Jerusalem, and then from Jerusalem being rebuilt to 30 AD, Christ's death, and then you have a gap. So that it should be this last 7, but instead you have a gap, and then when the tribulation starts in an unknown future time, you have the rapture, and then 3.5 years, and the Antichrist is doing a covenant, and then mid-trib, you have this horrible thing, and 3.5 months, and then you have Christ second coming in the millennium begins. So that's a standard way. So you've got this gap, and then you've got 2 returns. And so that's Daniel's 70 weeks. And you can see this is another version of that, slightly different dates, but you're starting in 444, rebuilding of Jerusalem, then Christ's death, an unstated gap, and then the 7 years of the tribulation. The other way to do it is that the decree is from the 457 decree. That is the decree to rebuild Jerusalem. It's completed here 49 years later. And then the start of this 7 would be at Jesus' public ministry. And for 3.5 years, he worked, and in the middle of that, he was cut off. And then 3.5 years later is when Stephen's stoned and the gospel goes to the Gentiles. If you take that view, God is saying to Daniel, look, you're praying about the temple. Know this, that the day will come when the temple that is significant to me is not the temple built in Jerusalem, but rather a temple built out of people. Holy people are being built up into this heavenly temple that's going to be a huge Holy of Holies. So if you do it that way, you have the 49 years, and that 483 years starts with the Messiah's ministry, and then his crucifixion, and then the stoning of Stephen. Question is, which one of those is right? Well, it's a very technical thing. I encourage you to be a Berean. Go see which one is true. Is the gap? Is it the 30 AD? Is it 33? Is the decree in 445 or is it in 457? Because that's going to affect how you interpret these passages. For me, I've held every view except amillennialism, and I'm right now a postmillennialist. I've been convinced by the postmillennial arguments, but I tell people I hold that with an open hand. There are a lot of texts that are difficult to interpret, and you get into these technical points, and I'm certain that the flaw is with me, not with the text. I just don't know enough and don't know the grammar enough and the history enough. But I loosely hold to the postmillennial view. I think the first command was given to the man and the woman: be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it. I think Jesus, as the new Adam, is going to fulfill everything, and ultimately through his church, I think the two will be fruitful, will multiply, will fill the earth, will subdue it, will rule over the birds of the air, the fish of the sea, and all the creeps that creep on the ground. I hold that view. I recognize it's a minority view, but it is a significant minority. I mean, Augustine, Athanasius, those are good people. B.B. Warfield. If you want to work through this issue for yourself, there's a very fair book. And let me see if I can find it on Amazon. There's a very good book, The Last Days According to Jesus, and I found it pretty fair. He goes through all the evidence. He wasn't committed one way or the other. Go through, see what you think. Be a Berean, and That's what I have for you today, and so I will see you next time.